When people think about the best countries to live in, the UK almost always makes the list. It has a reputation for stability, free healthcare, a strong economy, and world-class cities. But for the people who actually live there, that dream is falling apart. According to recent polls, over two-thirds of Britons say their country is in decline. Housing is out of reach, everyday costs are soaring, and public services are crumbling. Even immigrants who once saw the UK as a land of opportunity are starting to leave. In the past 5 years alone, over 500,000 Britons have left in search of a better life. So, what is really going on? Why do so many Brits feel like their country is broken? And if things don't change, what happens next? This is the dark side of the UK. For decades, the UK has been seen as one of the most desirable places to live. It's home to historic cities, world-renowned universities, and a financial sector that has made London one of the richest cities on Earth. The idea of Britain as a land of opportunity has been reinforced for generations, attracting workers, students, and families from all over the world. But beneath the surface, the reality for millions of Britons today tells a very different story. Surveys show that the overwhelming majority of UK residents believe their country is in decline. Rising costs, stagnant wages, and failing public services have left many people feeling hopeless about the future. Even immigrants, once drawn to the UK by the promise of economic stability, are now questioning whether staying is worth it. More and more are choosing to leave, looking for better opportunities in countries with lower costs of living and stronger public infrastructure. This growing sense of dissatisfaction isn't just anecdotal. It's backed by hard data. Wages have barely increased in real terms for over a decade, while the cost of everything from housing to basic necessities has soared. Life in Britain is becoming increasingly unaffordable, and for many, it feels like no matter how hard they work, they're barely keeping their heads above water. How did one of the world's richest nations end up like this? To understand Britain's decline, we need to start with the most immediate issue that affects everyone: the cost of living crisis. The cost of living in the UK has reached a breaking point. Over the past few years, inflation has surged, pushing prices to record highs and making everyday essentials more expensive than ever. In 2022, the inflation rate peaked at 11.1% in October, the highest in over 4 decades. Although it has moderated since then, with a rate of 2.5% in December 2024, the cumulative effect has left many households struggling to keep up. Wages haven't kept pace with these rising costs, leaving millions of people struggling just to afford basic necessities. Rent, food, and energy bills have surged, stretching household budgets to their limits. Even people with stable jobs are finding it harder to make ends meet, with many forced to cut back on spending or take on debt just to survive. Energy bills have doubled since 2021, making heating a home a financial burden, especially during winter. Grocery prices have skyrocketed, with staple foods like bread, milk, and vegetables costing significantly more than they did just a few years ago. Meanwhile, public transport fares continue to rise, making it even more expensive just to get to work. For many, it feels like the UK is becoming a country where only the wealthy can live comfortably. The idea of working hard and building a better future is starting to feel impossible for ordinary people. But while rising costs are affecting everyone, one issue in particular has pushed millions to their breaking point: the housing crisis. Owning a home in London has become a privilege reserved for the wealthy. As of November 2024, the average house price in the UK was £290,000, while in London, it stood at £511,279. With the median salary in the UK around £34,000, the dream of homeownership is increasingly out of reach for many. Renting isn't any better. In November 2024, the average private rent in London was £1,362 per month, reflecting a 9.3% annual increase. In boroughs like Kensington and Chelsea, rents averaged £3,520 per month. This surge has led to bidding wars for rental properties, with some landlords demanding months of rent upfront, pushing tenants into financial distress just to secure a place to live. But why has housing become so unaffordable? The UK simply isn't building enough homes. Strict planning laws, government inaction, and resistance from local communities have created an artificial scarcity, driving prices higher every year. Meanwhile, foreign investors and property developers continue to buy up homes as financial assets, pushing real people further out of the market. For millions, the dream of owning a home in Britain is no longer just difficult, it's impossible. But housing is just one part of a bigger problem. Even for those who manage to afford a place to live, making enough money to sustain a decent lifestyle is becoming harder than ever. For millions of Britons, working hard no longer guarantees a stable or comfortable life. Wages have barely moved in real terms for over a decade, making it harder to afford even the basics. On paper, salaries are rising, but once you factor in inflation, those increases barely make a difference. In 2024, the median full-time salary in the UK reached £37,000, a 6% increase from the previous year. But with inflation eating away at those gains, real wages have grown by just 2.9%, meaning most people feel no better off than before. As traditional full-time jobs fail to provide financial security, more people are turning to gig work just to make ends meet. Over 4.4 million Britons now rely on gig platforms weekly, contributing an estimated £20 billion to the economy. It's flexible, but there's a catch. No sick pay, no pensions, no job stability. Many gig workers juggle multiple jobs, working 10 to 12 hours a day, yet still struggle to afford rent and bills. For companies, the gig economy is perfect. Workers with no long-term contracts, no benefits to pay for, and no guarantees. But for workers, it's a different story. The job market is shifting, and for many, it's getting worse. As stable, well-paying jobs become harder to find, more people are left scrambling to survive in an economy that seems designed to keep them struggling. Britain's public services, once a source of national pride, are now in a state of alarming decline. The National Health Service is facing unprecedented challenges, with over 7.6 million people waiting for procedures and appointments. Waiting times for diagnostic tests have soared, with 1 in 5 patients waiting more than 6 weeks, a standard that hasn't been met in over a decade. The situation is so dire that patients are experiencing severe health repercussions due to delayed treatments. Since 2010, tens of thousands of patients have suffered from delayed treatments, leading to severe consequences, including cancer, blindness, amputations, and even death. Compensation claims for these failures have now exceeded £8 billion. Despite increased funding, staffing shortages remain a major problem, with nearly 1 in 12 NHS positions currently unfilled. Overworked doctors and nurses are struggling to keep up with demand, pushing the system closer to collapse. Beyond healthcare, other public services are also falling apart. Life expectancy in parts of the UK is declining, child obesity rates are climbing, and police forces are stretched thin due to budget cuts, leading to rising crime rates. Public services are failing, and millions are paying the price. For decades, the UK was seen as a place where hard work could lead to a comfortable life. But today, more people than ever are questioning whether staying is the right choice. The cost of living is rising faster than wages, home ownership feels out of reach, and public services are failing. Even those with good jobs are finding it harder to save, invest, or plan for the future. For some, the solution is to leave. Emigration from the UK has been steadily increasing, with more young professionals seeking opportunities in countries with lower costs and better quality of life. But is leaving the only answer? Can Britain turn things around? If something doesn't change soon, the UK could face an irreversible brain drain. And by the time the government reacts, it might already be too late.